Somewhere in the heart of Savannah, Georgia, on a street too quiet for most to notice, a war was brewing. Not a war of guns and bombs, but one of wills. And at the center of it all stood a woman who had already seen enough battles for 10 lifetimes. Her weapon? A telephone? Her allies? A loyalty forged through fire. What happened that afternoon would leave a mark on the neighborhood forever. If anyone had known who Ruth Ellis truly was, they might have thought twice about disturbing her peace. Ruth Ellis lived in a humble, time-worn house with a wraparound porch framed by chipping white paint and wild roses she had planted decades ago. At 91 years old, she carried herself with a quiet dignity that belied the storms she had weathered. A proud African-American woman and a veteran nurse from the Korean War, Ruth had spent her life fighting not just enemies overseas, but prejudice and injustice at home. Every morning, Ruth would sit on her porch, a delicate china cup of black coffee cradled between her gnarled fingers, watching the sun yawn over the oak-lined street. Life here was slow, predictable, the way Ruth liked it, until one Thursday afternoon, the rumble of engines shattered the tranquility like a hammer on glass. A gang of bikers, loud and aggressive, descended upon the street, their black leather jackets gleaming under the southern sun. They roared up to the curb near Ruth's home, laughing raucously as they dismounted and sprawled across the sidewalks, smoking and shouting vulgarities. Neighbors peeked nervously from behind curtains but dared not intervene. Ruth watched from her porch, her face unreadable, her coffee cup steady. "Looks like Grandma's ready for her nap," one biker hollered, the others exploding with laughter. Ruth said nothing. She simply stood, her body slow but sure, and retreated into her house, shutting the door with a soft click that somehow sounded louder than their engines. The bikers took her silence as submission. Their antics grew wilder. They tossed beer bottles onto her lawn, revved their engines so loud the windows rattled, played music laced with curses at full blast. For Ruth, it wasn't about noise. It was about respect, or rather, the blatant lack of it. That night, Ruth sat at her kitchen table, a yellowed photo album open in front of her. There she was, young, strong, smiling despite the battlefield in the background. Memories stirred, moments of fear, courage, and the unyielding resolve that had carried her through the darkest times. She traced a trembling finger over a photo of her late husband, Thomas, who always said, "Sometimes silence speaks louder than shouts." She picked up the old rotary phone on the counter, its dial cool beneath her fingertips, and turned to a page in her address book worn thin with time. She dialed a number she hadn't used in decades. It rang once, twice. "Ellis Residence," a gruff voice answered. "David," Ruth said, her voice steady. A pause. "Aunt Ruth, is that really you?" "It's me, baby. I need your help." The next morning, the bikers returned, cockier than ever. They lounged against Ruth's picket fence, laughing about scaring the old bat. But Ruth was ready. She sat on her porch, this time not alone. Standing beside her was a tall, broad-shouldered man in his late 40s. David Ellis, her nephew, and a respected officer with the Savannah Police Department. Flanking him were two more figures, retired Marines who owed their lives to Ruth's battlefield nursing decades ago. The bikers paused, their laughter trailing off into awkward coughs. David stepped forward, his badge gleaming under the sun. "Good morning," he said casually. "It seems there's been a misunderstanding." The leader of the bikers, a wiry man with a snake tattoo wrapped around his neck, tried to puff up. "We ain't breaking no laws, officer." David's smile was cold. "Intimidation, trespassing, vandalism, noise ordinance violations. I'd say you've broken a few." The air thickened. "Look," the leader stammered, "we didn't mean no harm." "Good," David said. "Then you won't mind cleaning up the mess you've made and finding somewhere else to enjoy your fun." Reluctantly, the bikers picked up their trash, mumbling curses under their breath. As they mounted their bikes to leave, Ruth's voice cut through the morning air, soft but strong. "Respect," she said, "is earned by how you treat others, not how loud you can shout." The leader glanced at her, and for the first time shame flickered across his face. But Ruth wasn't finished. That afternoon, David organized a gathering at Ruth's house. Word spread quickly. Neighbors who had once watched silently came, bringing dishes of food, flowers, and apologies. Stories emerged about Ruth's service, how she'd saved lives, fought discrimination, and quietly held the community together for decades without ever seeking recognition. One young mother, eyes glistening, placed a hand on Ruth's. "We should have stood up sooner." Ruth smiled kindly. "Strength comes when it's needed," she said. "Better late than never." Among the crowd was one familiar face, the youngest biker, a boy barely out of his teens. He approached the porch steps hesitantly. "Miss Ellis," he began, voice cracking. "I'm sorry. I didn't know." Ruth looked at him, her gaze soft but unyielding. "Now you do," she said. "What matters is what you do with that knowledge." The boy nodded, wiping a hand across his face, and disappeared into the crowd. That evening, as the sun dipped low and the cicadas began their nightly songs, Ruth sat on her porch again, the air thick with the scent of gardenias. David sat beside her, silent, content. "You scared them off good," he teased. Ruth chuckled. "I didn't scare them, David. I reminded them." "Reminded them of what?" She sipped her coffee, her eyes glinting with the wisdom of her years. "That silence," she said, "when wielded by those who know its power, can roar louder than 1,000 engines." And so, Ruth Ellis reclaimed her peace, not through anger, not through violence, but through courage, history, and the quiet force of a life well lived. The bikers learned a lesson they'd never forget. And the neighborhood? They learned that true strength often sits quietly on a porch, sipping coffee, waiting for the moment to change everything. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more inspiring tales of resilience, courage, and quiet heroism.